a Noble Media Group member.
The world is very different now, for man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life.
6,000 years ago, man invented the wheel. 5,000 years later, he invented the printing press. 460 years later, he would fly. 70 years later, he would step on the moon. And 8 years later, he would send a spacecraft beyond our solar system. Today, we have computers which can think for themselves and robots that can dance. Properly utilized, today's technologies can bring an end to poverty, hunger, and even the need to work, or to make bombs that will end all life on Earth. Will we destroy ourselves or come together?
It is now 85 seconds to midnight. This is the closest the world has ever been to midnight.
Join Joe Carvin as he explores these questions, because mankind is on the hinge of history.
Well, welcome to my podcast. My name is Joe Carvin, and I'll be hosting the podcast we are calling The Hinge of History. Today, I thought I would briefly introduce myself and then generate a conversation with Brian as to why we're calling this broadcast The Hinge of History, as well as discuss the goals for this podcast. Yesterday, I celebrated my 71st birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. 71 years on the planet Earth in this life continuum. Look, over those 71 years, I've had the good fortune to live and work on 5 continents, learning 4 languages along the way. I've also been fortunate to work in several different sectors of our economy. For most of my career, I was an equity analyst working on Wall Street, covering emerging markets from both the buy side and sell side. Of course, the last 12 years, I've been working with the education sector after creating an educational enrichment program called One World Future Ready. I've also held elective office at the local level, serving for 8 years as town supervisor of the town of Rye and 3 years as village trustee in my hometown of Port Chester, New York. I did run for Congress in 2012, suffering a fairly sound defeat, but it was a great learning experience, and I want to invite everyone to check out the video we produced along with my good friend Bill Riley during that campaign. In fact, I was thrilled to be asked by my good friend Bill O'Reilly, who effectively ran my 2012 campaign, to produce this podcast on a topic I've been following closely since before my campaign, and that is the future of humanity. I've long believed that humanity is at a decisive crossroads, and the decisions we make as a species in coming years will determine the fate of humanity for millennia to come. What do you think, Brian? What's the state of humanity today?
Well, I think it's going to be a very long discussion about the state of humanity. I know we want to dive into that, and I'm looking forward to that discussion. But I just read an article, Joe, from
Yep.
Peggy Newman in the Wall Street Journal, and effectively, and I'm just going to give you the title of it. It says, "Are we ready for the AI tsunami?" What's your take on that, Joe?
Well, I read the article as well, Brian, and my take is we're not ready. One, that's the short answer. That's why we're producing this podcast. But secondly, she's just scratching the surface. We've written our own book called The Great Transition to Sustainable Superabundance, which goes into depth about the challenges we're facing. What's really fascinating, Brian, and that's what's going to be a lot of fun with this show. I've been watching for the last 3 years since the Chat GPT moment to watch how this whole idea of AI and generative AI is percolating across the globe. And it's fascinating. There's no single answer, but there's huge potential and some significant downsides. So, yes, get ready for the tsunami, and it's far more profound than the article lets you know.
Well, looking forward to that. So, I do want to talk about the state of humanity. So I'll give you some background for the audience that don't know. I'm mostly involved in politics today, national politics. I've helped our local congressman woman get elected, but most of the stuff I don't is more national types of politics. But my heart and love and soul is in science. My degrees were in biology and chemistry from Baylor University. Those I wasn't a biochemist. Biology and chemistry is two separate majors. And I was actually awarded the National Science Foundation award to represent Baylor University in organic chemistry. So, and
Oh,
I was the
organic
only one that did that.
chemistry.
Yeah.
Isn't that the toughest one?
It is. It's so it's we there's a patent under my name from doing that, which everybody can just Google and it pops up, and I exactly got that much money out of it, just so you know. But it was a wonderful experience. It doesn't change really my picture and view. I understand a lot of things from a scientific background, but a lot of my views over the last 10 years have really been focused on politics and how that affects us. And I think it'll be a good back and forth with us, Joe, because how I picture this and view, not just from a scientific point of view, but also from a reality point of view with today's politics, I'm alarmed. And when you say, how has this affected humanity? How will it affect humanity? Well, I'm concerned about exactly that. Is humanity ready and truly ready for AI? Is humanity ready for the types of drugs that we're developing right now, which can substantially increase people's lifespans, but are very controversial? And I think those are a lot of questions that, for me personally, I would like to discuss and, maybe come to some type of a consensus on. So, yeah.
We'll have ample opportunity to talk about. Just before we start talking about why we're calling this program the Hinge of History, tell me what kind of topics you're talking about on your political program. What are the last three issues you've talked about, if you don't mind me asking, on the political?
Well, and again, I'll base some of this on a science perspective. We've got somebody running Health and Human Services right now that's not a PhD or an MD and effectively has no science background at all. And so when we start mixing politics in with policy in with science, okay, those three always mix very well. And so that's a big one for me because when we start basing and we start making decisions from politics that should be strictly a medical decision, that affects all of us as Americans and really the world. I don't know what's going to happen to AI. That's the second part of it. My concern is that it's going to take a lot of people's jobs. I'll give you a little personal anecdotal evidence is that my youngest son had been studying as a comp sci major and has since dropped comp sci to go in another direction. And the reason being is that it was the number one degree that if you had that degree graduating out of school, you were the most likely to be unemployed. That's
Really?
how much the world has changed.
Wow.
History majors were more likely to get employed than somebody with a
Wow.
comp sci.
You need to send me that article. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of changes politically. How will our politics affect us? And we do have to think of a lot of these things from a political viewpoint because I would think, Joe, and you're the expert at this, but I would think that if we can't get our politicians informed and making good decisions, be it for AI, be it for nuclear weapons, be it for all of the things that will substantially or could substantially change humanity, then our ability in this podcast to really make some change or affect change and their abilities is probably going to be a lot lower.
Well, that's so, Brian. That's a great point. Now, the good news is the political parties haven't really taken up this issue in any kind of serious-minded way. So we're looking at you. This broadcast, as you know, won't be political. In fact, it looks to take more of an objective, long-term scientific lens and point at our species as a whole over long periods of time.
Excellent.
My view of the world came into sharp focus in the last couple of years when I countered this idea of long-termism as put forward by Oxford philosopher William McCaskill, who cited these quotes from Oxford professor Derek Parfit, who in 2011 wrote the following: "We live during the hinge of history. Given the scientific and technological discoveries of the last 2 centuries, the world has never changed as fast." This is 2011, mind you. "We shall soon have greater powers to transform not only our surroundings, but ourselves and our successors. If we act wisely in the next few centuries, humanity will survive its most dangerous and decisive period. Our descendants could, if necessary, go elsewhere, spreading through the galaxy. Now, Brian, what do you think? Are we living at the most decisive and dangerous time in the whole of human history?
Well, I've been pretty blunt about that one. Um, and I'm not alone in this belief, so I'm going to throw it out.
Please.
Um, I think we are at the most dangerous time in history. I could actually make the argument that it's a more dangerous time than when the Soviet Union and the United States were that close to armed conflict. And my reasoning for this is that, of course, we've got AI. We don't know when we've now got computers thinking for themselves and doing things for themselves that we didn't program for. This is complete unknown. Uh, our nuclear weapon capacity and the START program of reducing nuclear weapons, as far as I know, has not been renewed. That's very concerning. And, we've got we really have to stop and look at what's happening right now politically around the world and the changes that are being made. And so, yeah, I think it's one of the most dangerous points in history that we've ever had. People have to remember that 100 years ago, roughly 100 years, less than 100 years ago, mankind did not have the capability to destroy himself. Mankind does have that capability now to completely wipe away most of all life on Earth. And so we really have to start approaching things through the lens of how do we create a conversation about where we're at with this? How do we address it? And that's hopefully part of what we can do with this show, be it climate change, be it nuclear weapons, be it AI. And the only last comment I want to make, and I'll push it back to you, Joe, maybe with a question. Um, the the clock, the doomsday clock, has recently moved from 89 seconds to 85 seconds, I believe it is. And that's the closest it's ever been to humanity destroying itself. And so I'm not alone in my views about the concerns, but what I'd like to know from you, what your concerns are, and then how you see some of the upsides, Joe.
All right. Well, first and foremost, it's really quite interesting. So the doomsday clock, as people may or may not know, uh, Oppenheimer and Einstein, amongst other atomic scientists, created the Bulletin for Atomic Scientists, and they created the doomsday clock in 1947. And the goal of the doomsday clock was to give humanity and the average guy in the street a sense of how close we were to self-destruction. And so they set it originally at 7 minutes to midnight. It became the safest ever in 1991 with the START Treaty, as you
Mm-hmm.
said, that and the fall of the Berlin Wall. So we're 17 minutes to midnight. Midnight's game over. 17 minutes is the safest it ever. Unfortunately, every year since then has come down. It's come down rapidly as the global society or global world disconnects, and worse. It's getting worse and worse. So they started measuring in seconds rather than minutes
Right.
in 2020. Went from 100 seconds to 90 to 89 last year and to 85, as you point out, this year. Yes, what's happening is that the number of threats is increasing. So they start off with nuclear threat, and you can see clearly, in fact, the Secretary General of the United Nations 2 years ago said we're one miscalculation, one mistake away from nuclear annihilation. I don't remember the UN Secretary General ever saying that. Second, obviously, the war with Russia between U.S. and Ukraine creates a whole new set of risks with Russia threatening the use of nuclear war. And then on top of that, you have climate change, which is a real risk without civilizational risk without being addressed. And then finally, most importantly, perhaps the most imminent, is this AI threat. So the consensus among AI futurists, Elon Musk, Jeffrey Hinton, who got the Nobel Peace Prize, or no Nobel Prize, in part because of his thoughts on AI threats. The consensus view from them is more or less 15 to 20% risk of human extinction from AI. Now, there's some that are 98%, some, zero. But the consensus is probably, and again, there's no one has a crystal ball, but 15% to 20% risk of human extinction and 85% of human abundance. And so I think that's correct. And I think one of the things, there's been a huge address, the planet and Earthlings have done a good job of highlighting and featuring the risks associated with climate change. And in my view, done a far less good highlighting and planning for the risks associated with nuclear proliferation, even at the grassroots level, and in particularly AI. So there's been some efforts to regulate AI, but ultimately they've fallen short. And in fact, I guess the other thing to point out, I lived in London for a number of years, and the British have a wonderful global perspective. So I mentioned the Hinge of History. There's two British thought leaders that really got me thinking about the future of humanity before my 2012 campaign. And that was Sir Martin Rees, wrote a book called Our Final Century, and James Martin. But I did want to bring one other quote from Derek Parfit to the fore here, if I could, because it's full of the kinds of ideas we want to talk about here, Brian. So he went on to say in 2015, I think we're living at the most critical part of human history. Agreed. The 20th century, I think, was the best and worst of all centuries so far. But now it seems fairly likely that there are no intelligent beings elsewhere in the observable universe. Stop, scientists. No intelligent beings anywhere in the universe. Brian, what's your take?
Um, I think it's extremely unlikely there's not. I think there has to be. It's as many have pointed out, they're a lot smarter than I am. That we are the only that we know of intelligent species or any life at all in our solar system. But our solar system is just a microcosm of a microcosm of a little bitty point just in our own galaxy. And so, if you think about the years since the Big Bang and the amount of time it take for a a an intelligent beings, whatever they are, uh, to become civilized and be able to send space signals out through space, right? Because that's the only way we're going to know that they're here right now. I haven't
Yep.
seen any spacecraft landing on the White House lawn lately.
Not yet. Not yet.
Um, but it would take just even traveling at the speed of light would take years and years and years. And our ability to detect that has only been, what would it be, Joe? 120 years, maybe, no, probably not even that long.
Yeah,
Probably not
yeah.
even that long. So I think it's there. I do. I think there's a very good chance that we have life inside our solar system on Europa, or maybe in some other forms that we're just not really, we just don't know yet. But to
Well,
your
no,
point, I would love, and I know we're getting run short on time.
sure.
I'd love to ask you a couple of questions.
Yeah, please.
Um, will we be able to on this show talk about the potential for alien life? Will we on this show talk about AI and deep dive into that and the positives and negatives? Climate change, as we're having this conversation and we're looking forward to the next meetings, the next 5 or 10. What are some of the key subjects you think, Joe, that we ought to start having discussions about?
All right. So now, and I'll try and bring it all together. So Enrique Fermi, the famous Italian scientist, would take a different view, and they call it the Fermi paradox. He's saying we've been around for 13.8 billion years. And so plenty of time for other life forms to have formed and come into our consciousness, even with the great distances that you talk about.
Hmm.
And so the Fermi paradox has led to the great filter theory. And the great filter theory is as civilizations advance in technological capacity, rather than use that technological capacity to become spacefaring, they destroy themselves.
Mm.
And so again, there's a great article we'll share on our website. But at the end of the day, that's one thesis. And one of the big questions is the great filter behind us or in front of us? But that's the first point. The second point is yes, we want to talk about the existential risk. Civilization will go in depth. Agreeing, climate change, nuclear proliferation, AI. We're going to go into depth. But there's one thing I really want to talk about, which is sustainable superabundance. See,
What is that?
for the first time in human history, technological advances have provided humanity with the opportunity to bring an end to poverty and then to hunger, and then to disease, and then to the need to work.
Hmm.
I mean, we have a whole bunch. If you look at my book, The Great Transition, you can see it all there. And you're not going to look at Joe Carvin. You're going to listen to Elon Musk. You're going to listen to Demis Hassabis from DeepMind Google, who talks about radical abundance. Demis Hassabis says we can solve disease. And so now, but this is the beauty of it. This is why we're at the hinge of history, Brian. We're at the hinge of history because ultimately it's down to us, the 8.23 billion code creators of the universe. Either we're going to get it right or not. And if we get it right, we can create a world of superabundance. And if not, we're going to steal and rob the chances of a trillion people yet to be born. I became a grandfather 4 weeks ago. And
Congratulations.
thank you so much. Everything I do is for my little granddaughter. I want to create a world of abundance for her, at least a safe world. So yes, we need to focus on human survival. All these political conversations are BS. I mean, all these who's in, who's out, who's in, who's out. Baloney. Human survival has to be the number one goal. And if we overcome the civilizational challenges, we all require a global solution. Then we can create this world of sustainable superabundance, radical abundance. Imagine, and again, the new challenge is going to be ultimately the new challenge is going to be what's my life purpose? Because if you don't, there's no need to work in the next 10 to 20 years. And in fact, Brian, I want to anticipate one of our new shows. How are we going to create this world of abundance? Well, it's fascinating. And we've got a whole bunch of videos on our website and our book. But ultimately, it's robots using AI to do everything we need. So eventually, robots are everything we
Hmm.
need. Now, Ryan, I understand you have a new great video we'll share in our next show tomorrow to kick things off tomorrow. Radical abundance. We're going to see, what I understand, a dramatic improvement in robotic capabilities in just the last year.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I saw that, and I can't wait to share that with the audience because it was just, even if you just watch 5 seconds of that video, you're going to go, "Oh my gosh, things have changed," and they're changing so fast. It's so fast every day. It feels like.
It is every day. We started off with the idea that get ready for the AI tsunami. Again, I've been following this now for 10 years. And I was ahead of the curve and I fell behind the curve. And I keep thinking I'm getting ready to the curve. But even Elon Musk says, I don't have courtside seats. He says, I'm on the playing field. And there's not a week that goes by that I don't say, wow, wow, and wow again.
Hmm.
Elon Musk is surprised. Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, he's right there. He's written two great essays. One about the potential of AI, and one more recently about the dangers of AI. No one knows. And ultimately, we'll talk a little bit about Leo Aschenbrenner, wrote a fantastic, this kid's great. Graduated from Columbia University at 19, valedictorian, and worked at OpenAI, decided that, hey, these guys are not as safe as they should. Wrote a 165-page essay called On Situational Awareness.
Hmm.
He said, we need to take this conversation out of the San Francisco elite into the general public. And that's the goal here. So superabundance is the fun. As you can tell, I'm a pretty optimistic guy.
You
I'm
are.
three quarters full kind of guy. But I really believe, and by the way, this is our last chance. We have between 1,000 and 3,000 days to react.
Hmm.
So there's urgent need. And as you say, the pace of change accelerating. And what's really fun for me, and I want to share this fun with you, Brian, and with our audience, the whole world right now is trying to figure out how to use AI. It's just percolating right now. And everybody's trying to figure out how to use it. And ultimately, this is sort of what happened when Edison created the light bulb and electricity. But there's one fundamental difference everybody needs to know. This entity, this tool is intelligent.
Hmm.
It's intelligent, so it amplifies your intelligence. One theme we'll talk about is one's capacity as an individual, as a business, as a municipality, as a school district. Your capacity to use AI will determine your future success.
Hmm. That's going to be amazing. I'm looking forward to it. Um, yeah, I guess just one last thought, if I can throw one out, Joe, is that being able to have these kind of conversations, apolitical, this isn't anybody's fault. That's irrelevant to this discussion. I think is where we need to go as a mankind and as a civilization, because this isn't just an American thing anymore. This would be a worldwide thing. Is that
No,
kind of your thoughts? I mean, I know we got to wrap up, so I'm just asking, is that kind of your thoughts too?
tell you very quickly, 1000%. So yesterday I was 71 years old. The last 2 years, I write to my One World friends across the globe. I have an education enrichment program called One World, whose whole goal is to bring humanity together, K-12 education, learn with and from one another. And I highlighted a principle from Nanjing, China, where on the front, in the first, is when you enter the school, there's in bushes carved in English the word love.
Hmm.
Can you imagine U.S. high school with the word love carved in Chinese characters? No. And in
No.
addition to that, she encourages her teachers to teach with a loving heart. And for me, that's exactly the spirit. We need to get China and the United States working together. The most important bilateral relationship. We need to find ways to work together. People to people relationships. I spent 36 days in China this last year. People to people, we can get it done. And that's what it's got to be, people to people. In fact, I founded my charity when I was at Harvard. Human being to my left was from Germany. Human being to my right was from Japan. And I realized 60 years earlier, my life goal had been to murder each of these human beings.
Hmm.
And 6 years later, with colleagues, I want to create that environment of collegiality in the real world. Working with you, Brian. My end goal for this, I'm sorry to say this out loud. I want us to win the Nobel Peace Prize. That's my goal.
I'll settle for just making a big difference in the world. But yeah,
Oh, that's
I'm
the
looking
most.
forward to it. I'm looking really forward to it, Joe. Thanks, and we're
Thank
gonna
you.
have some fun with this.
Yep. Thanks.
You've been watching Joe Carvin's Hinge of History. The No Bull Media Group is available on all major social media platforms. Make sure to give us a follow where you can watch this show and many others.
A No Bull Media Group member.